Behind every great empire, there is a shadow. Not a king, not a minister, but a ghost, weaving the threads of power within the silence of opulent chambers. This story is not about a king. It is about the woman who became the shadow behind the French throne. Her name was Diane de Poitiers. She was feared. She was hated. She was worshipped. She was the royal mistress whose power seemed unshakable. But no shadow lasts forever, and her downfall began not with a conspiracy of enemies, not with the king's anger, but with a single fatal scheme meant to destroy her own flesh and blood, her sister. This is the story of how the Black Queen dug her own grave. And here is the truth, hidden for centuries beneath the gilding and the whispers. Picture not just France. Picture a dawn over the Loire, the mid-16th century. The air is cold, damp, smelling of river silt, wet stone, and smoke from the chimneys of the chateau de Chenonceau. This is not just a castle. It is the kingdom's heartbeat, and its pulse comes not from a throne room in Paris, but from the private chamber of one woman, Diane de Poitiers. She is in her 40s. At an age when most women at court were considered old, she is the most powerful person in the realm after the king. But how? The secret does not lie solely in King Henry's love. The secret lies in alchemy. She is not just the king's mistress. She is an architect. The architect of the king, the architect of the court, the architect of her own myth. Recall their story. A young Prince Henry, a hostage in a foreign land, humiliated and alone. And she, a brilliant lady of the court, writes to him. Not love letters. No, letters of instruction. She teaches him how to survive, how to carry himself, how to hide his fear. She becomes his guardian shadow, his political tutor, his only support. She poured her soul into him, like a sculptor shaping a block of marble. And when he finally ascends to the throne, their bond becomes unbreakable. This is not a youthful fling. It is a deep, almost mystical bond between a creator and her creation. She wears only black and white, the colors of widowhood, formally honoring her late husband. But in this monochrome palette lies a genius public relations move. Among the courtiers, bright as parrots, she is like the moon among stars. She is impossible to miss. Her image proclaims, I am unique. I am above fashion. I am eternal. Look at Chenonceau. It is her sanctuary. Her initials DH are intertwined with the royal lilies everywhere. She manages the crown's finances. She decides who gets a post and who is sent into exile. Her day begins at 4 in the morning. An ice bath, a horseback ride, then hours of receiving petitioners. She is a machine of power. Perfect, cold, flawless. But even the strongest fortress has a weak point. Not in its walls, but in its foundation. For Diane, that foundation was family, trust, and her younger sister, Françoise, the one with whom she shared childhood secrets in their family estate. The one whose devotion Diane considered as constant as the changing seasons. In a world where every gesture is a calculation and every word is a currency, her sister was her quiet harbor. The only person with whom she could simply be a sister. And it was this bond, this last thread to something human, that the Black Queen would decide to use in her most dangerous game. She could not have imagined that by pulling this thread, she would loosen a knot that would tighten into a noose around her own neck. Because when you are accustomed to seeing people as pawns, sooner or later, you fail to notice that one of them is a conspirator. Now we approach the heart of the mystery, to the moment when the cold calculation of the Black Queen met a fragile yet dangerous substance, the human heart. And not just any heart, but that of her own flesh and blood. Picture these chambers. Gilded moldings, silk-covered walls that swallow sound, and the thick scent of wax and dried violets. Here, in this gilded cage, a conspiracy was born that would mark the beginning of the end. Diane's sister, Françoise de Brise, the Countess de Maulevrier, was neither a star of the court nor a political genius. She was the shadow of a shadow, loyal, predictable, and she was having an affair. Her beloved was Jean de Montamer, a noble from an influential family tied to the Guise clan, Diane's sworn enemies. To Diane, this wasn't a romance. It was a vulnerability, a breach in her own defenses, and one she intended to turn into a weapon. Diane's voice, "Sister, you must understand. This isn't just about my position. It's about our family, our entire name. The Guises are weaving a web against us. Your friend is at the very center of it. You are the only one who can help us. You are the only one who can reach him." And Diane laid out her plan. It was brilliant in its cunning. Françoise was to pretend to be more in love than ever, to trust Jean completely, to draw out his plans, the names of his allies, their next move, to learn how the Guises intended to strike at the king, and at her, Diane. Diane's voice, "Bring me his letters. Repeat his words to me. This isn't betrayal, Françoise. It is duty. It is our only defense." And in that moment, something inside Françoise broke. She looked at her sister and saw not a relative asking for help. She saw a strategist using her most intimate feelings as a bargaining chip, turning love into an instrument of espionage, transforming whispered confidences into evidence. This plan didn't smell of protection. It smelled of filth and treachery. But she was afraid of losing her sister's favor, that source of her own strength and status. And so she agreed. But fear is a poor advisor, and resentment is a sharp knife. Every stolen line from her lover's letters, every forced inquiry, was another drop of poison in her soul. She realized, if the plot were uncovered, the wrath of the Guises would fall upon her. Diane would remain on the sidelines, uninvolved. She was expendable, and so Françoise did the unthinkable. She went to the one person who would understand her fury, to the lawful wife, to the queen everyone ignored, to Catherine de Medici, and she told her everything, the entirety of Diane's plan, every detail of the scheme. She gave Catherine not just information, but the key to destroying the Black Queen. She revealed that Diane was no goddess, but merely a woman willing to betray her own blood for power. And in that moment, within Catherine de Medici's dark chambers, a new, deadly alliance was born, a union of bitterness and hatred, a union that prepared a cup of poison for Diane de Poitiers, a cup she had, herself, brought to her own lips. Now, the poison of betrayal, slow and relentless, began seeping into the very stone pores of the Louvre. Picture this. Just yesterday, courtiers hung on Diane's every glance, every gesture, striving to decipher her will. Today, when their eyes meet hers, they look away, almost imperceptibly. A whisper arises, soft, barely audible, and all the more terrifying for it. Creeps through the halls like a cold draft. The words Françoise had spoken in Catherine de Medici's chambers did not stay there. They took flight, and this whisper wasn't about politics, taxes, or war. It was about something deeply human and deeply base, the betrayal of a sister. Have you heard? Diane sought to sacrifice her own flesh and blood, used Françoise's lover, planned to make her a scapegoat. This rumor was more damaging than any accusation of embezzlement or conspiracy. It struck at the very core of Diane's image, her infallibility, her iron logic, her control. Diane, of course, sensed the shift. Like an experienced sailor, she felt the dangerous swell beneath the ship of her power. But she was the Black Queen. She could not show weakness. Her mask of impassivity had to remain flawless. She tried to carry on as usual, issuing commands, receiving ambassadors. But now, her orders were followed with a barely noticeable delay. Her gaze no longer paralyzed with fear, but sparked a hidden curiosity. Is that the one who betrayed her own sister? And what of the king, Henry, whose love and devotion to Diane had seemed as unshakable as stone? At first, he dismissed the rumors. But Catherine, his lawful wife, patient and silent all these years, now began her subtle work. Not with accusations, no, with doubts. Catherine de Medici's voice, calm, soft, yet venomous. Your Majesty, I worry only for the stability of the realm. Your favorite strength comes from your trust in her. But if even her own sister cannot be sure of her loyalty, what are others to think? People are beginning to fear not her power, but her unpredictability. These words fell on fertile ground like seeds. Henry began to recall small things, excessively harsh decisions against certain courtiers, a cold calculus in certain matters. And for the first time he saw it. The woman he had idolized as perfection could be not just a creator, but a destroyer. A crack in the ideal that was the beginning of the end. Trust, that fragile crystal, had been chipped. The illusion was shattered. Catherine de Medici, a shadow for so long, was now in motion. She did not attack directly. Methodically, day by day, she intercepted threads of influence. She drew closer those who had been wronged by Diane. She pointedly showed concern for Françoise, demonstrating to the court who was now the protector of victims. She became the alternative, the predictable, steady, lawful queen. Diane's power was melting away like the morning fog over the Loire. She was still powerful, still wealthy, still loved by the king. But her foundation had been undermined. The shadow she was could not exist without the bright light of absolute trust and fear. The light had dimmed, and fear had been replaced by a whisper. And in that whisper, her former glory was drowning. The Black Queen still ruled, but her true kingdom, the minds and hearts of the court, had already begun to drift away. All that remained was to await the final mortal blow, and it was now just over the horizon. King Henry's death in the tournament was the formal end of her power, but her downfall had begun much earlier. In the moment she decided her sister was merely a pawn in her grand game. Exiled by Catherine de Medici, stripped of her wealth and titles, Diane de Poitiers lived out her days in solitude. The Black Queen had been defeated, not by an army, not by an open conspiracy, but by the poison of a single intrigue, a poison she had brewed for another, but ended up drinking herself. This story is a lesson for the ages. Think about it. The most devastating plots are not born in the chambers of enemies, but in our own hearts. The most crushing betrayals happen where we least expect them. Power built on fear and intrigue is a castle made of sand. And when the wave of truth comes, it crumbles, washing everything away. Now, what do you think? Was Diane de Poitiers a brilliant strategist, or a cruel tyrant who reaped what she sowed? Share your view in the comments. Subscribe if you want to hear more forgotten stories where love, power, and betrayal intertwine in a deadly dance. Until we meet again in the past.